In the name of God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Please be seated. Well, having been in Wilmington about 8 or 9 months now, I have finally made it to a golf course. My clubs came out of the closet and into my car, and so as not to overdo it, I decided I'd play 9 holes at the Wilmington Municipal Golf Course. And so I arrived about midday, and as often happens at public golf courses when you show up by yourself and you don't have a tee time, is the starter just puts you with other folks who equally don't have a foursome. And which is fine with me. I did that all the time when I was in Houston and when I was learning how to play golf. You rarely are playing from exactly the same space, so it's not a problem. And so I met 2 gentlemen who often play together, Chris and Caleb, and then there was an older man named John who was using a pull cart and walking, and I found that to be ambitious and something I strive for. And what's helpful, since this was the very first time I had ever played this course, what's helpful is to have a few people that you can play with that have been there before, because they can help point things out to you if you're not sure where the best place to hit the ball is. And while I hadn't asked for this in particular, when we got to about the 4th or 5th hole, it was a hole that's called it was a blind tee shot. So that means from the boxes where you tee off your first shot of the hole, you couldn't see the green because there was a dogleg left, right? Think about what that means if you're not a golfer, dogleg left. And there was a hill, right? All this lingo. You don't realize, it's not only Episcopalians that have lingo. And so the guys, Chris and Caleb, were sitting in their cart, and I was getting up to the tee box. And the other characteristic of golf courses is about 150 yards out from the center of the green is often a post in the middle of the fairway, a thin striped post that lets you know that you're 150 yards out. So that was still a ways down there, but that was at least visible. So I couldn't see the green, but I could see the post. So I'm standing there on the tee box, and the 2 guys just offer, unsolicited, we just want to let you know that if you hit the ball right over that 150-yard post, you're going to be in a good position. Where it lands will be where you want to be. And at first I just sort of paused, and then I looked at them and I said, well, I'm really encouraged by the fact that you think the fact that you've told me that will actually influence how I hit this tee shot. That you have that kind of faith in my ability with what you've seen so far, that I can actually calibrate and navigate that. So as I stood there thinking about what they had to say, I brought my 3 metal club back because I never hit the driver. I'm not good at the driver. Used my 3-wood. And slow back swing, clean follow through, straight over the 150-yard pole, and it just kept rolling and rolling downhill. Of course, I couldn't see where it was until I got up over the hill myself. And it was about a pitching wedge shot up to the green where it had landed. Beautiful, if I do say so myself. And so in their encouragement, they showed belief in me in a particular way. And a few holes later, on the 8th hole, I found myself in a deep sand trap. And it wasn't the first time in these 9 holes that I had been in the sand trap. But this time, as I'm standing down in this deep sand trap with a big lip in front of me, I hear the voices of Chris and Caleb again. And one, I can't see them at this point. One of them says, remember to hit it about 2 inches behind the ball. Because the idea with the sand shot is that you pick up the sand and then the sand carries it up out of the trap. And then the other one said, and make it a full follow through. Clearly they had been watching what I wasn't doing right before. And so, with their encouragement and gentle instruction, I planted myself and I drew that club back and I hit through, full follow through. And what do you think happened? I got out of the trap. Thank you for believing in me, whoever said that. And I immediately got out of the sand trap and looked at both of them and I said, y'all are going to be in my sermon this Sunday. And Chris said, well, that'll be a first for me. Caleb was silent on the matter. And what was interesting is then when we got to the 9th hole, I found myself in a bunker side sand trap again. And at this point, the guys were off finding their own ball, doing their own thing, but I still had their voice in my head. And I was able to follow that same encouraging instruction. And what do you think happened? I got out of the sand trap again. Now, let me just tell you, that did not happen earlier in the round. That was not happening, one shot out of the sand. So it was very encouraging. And I couldn't help but think about this gospel from John's, the Gospel of John, the reading for today. Here we have this prayer that Jesus is providing for the disciples. When the first time we went through John's Gospel, in preparation for the crucifixion, this prayer reads a different way. It's one that includes in it warning that things are about to get tough. And it asks God for protection for the disciples, that he's going away and he won't be there. So he asks the Father to protect them. And there's words of comfort. But in light of where we are in our liturgical calendar, we're reading this again now after the resurrection. And so as I read this prayer, I see in it some instruction and direction as to how we are to live into being the resurrected people following Jesus Christ. And so I think this passage has a lot of points of instruction and direction and encouragement. It says in part, while I was with them, I protected them in your name. And now I am no longer in the world, but they are in the world, and I am coming to you. Holy Father, protect them in your name, so that they may be one as we are one. I am not asking you to take them out of the world, but I ask you to protect them from the evil one. Sanctify them in the truth. Your word is truth. So this instruction to be one, even when things are difficult, even when you're facing difficult circumstances, there's this prayer and encouragement for them to be one. And I think living into a resurrected life for us to be one. And then direction and example of speaking the truth, even if the message that may be being sent is a hard one for the listener to hear. The way that this works is when we speak truth in love, when we come from a place of kindness and encouragement. And so in addition to Chris and Caleb, my two golf side voices, I had two other voices come to me this week and do some truth telling that I needed to hear. One came to me, scheduled time, we met together, because something I had said in a sermon several weeks ago just kept being troubling for them in a particular way. And so they came and talked to me and shared that with me, and we could have a conversation about it. And it showed such an amount of trust to come and say, hey, this didn't sit right with me. And to have a conversation about it was gratifying for me because it helped me understand how a particular point came across that wasn't fully intended. And so I learned from that experience. And then later in the week, somebody else came to me and shared more feedback. And it helped me see, they shared information about how my communication style for some folks can be challenging, and how the perception of my accessibility has created obstacles for some people, and that's helpful. Let me just tell you, I have been receiving feedback since I was a very small child. I am used to it. My mother was a teacher when my dad was in law school. From the earliest of times when we would write papers using the World Book encyclopedias, the feedback that I got on my papers from my mom, had lots of cross-outs and this word is better and all of that. And the good news was I took that as encouragement. I took that as something I could learn from. And in 20 years of a banking career, mostly as a supervisor, but never as the CEO, I gave and received feedback regularly. And one thing I learned is that giving it with candor, with kindness, with specific examples, and in a timely manner is the most effective way that we can learn from each other. And I have to say, though, my favorite memory of feedback was given to me by Alice, my wife. On the day of my graduation from Candler, my parents were in, we had already had the Emory big campus-wide graduation. We had had lunch at the Candler School of Theology, and then we were headed to Glenn Memorial Chapel for the diploma ceremony. And my dad, who loves to walk as much as he can, didn't mind that there was a huge hill that you had to climb in order to get from the School of Theology up to Glenn Memorial. So he took his book and he headed up the hill. And my mom, who doesn't get around quite as easily as that, wanted to take the shuttle, and so Alice and I went with her. And when we got to the intersection, we realized that the shuttle stop was up a different hill, but still up a hill. And so my mom, not wanting to try to navigate that hill, asked the police officer that was standing in the middle of the intersection if he could stop the shuttle when it got down to the bottom of the hill so that we could board it there. And I went straight into my embarrassed 12-year-old self. My mother is asking somebody to do something, and it's embarrassing me. But he gladly stopped the shuttle. We all got on board. Others boarded and were quite appreciative of her boldness. And we got out, and Mom went to go find Dad, and Alice pulled me aside, and she said, just a little word of advice. When you're with your mom, don't be short with her when you're in the collar. It's really not a good idea anytime, but especially when you're in the collar. It was perfect. That is a day of graduation. Truth-telling in love. That is how we stay one. That is how we as a community trust and encourage one another fully. I will tell you that patience is part of that equation. Because honestly, the sand traps I can get myself into, some of them are more problematic than others. And this is the first time I'm playing this course. So, with prayers of encouragement and support for one another, we will be one, and we are one. Amen.